As the international break fades into the distance, South American football and a well-rested Nathan Joyce appears for what should be another hectic upcoming season on the continent. 9 bets, 1 pod treble and a 4-man panel. All that and more on today's show. Hello and welcome to the Football Betting Podcast powered by BettingExpert. I'm your host, Sam Ingram, and I'm joined by Daniele Fisichella, Scott Thornton, and I've mentioned him already, Nathan Joyce. Nathan, how's it going? Long time no see on the pod.
Yeah, I'm coming out of hibernation. Brazil is back. Libertadores is back. Got a new lease of life. So yeah, delighted to be back. And yeah, it's been an extended break, but it's going to be a hectic period. Games in South America almost every 2 days now. So plenty to get involved with.
Love it. And although you've not been on the pod recently, you have been quite heavily featured on site. So you've got a Serie A anti-post article up on site and also a Copa Libertadores on site as well. Have you got any anti-post bet that you really like the look of this time around this season?
Yeah, I think my biggest, and it's drifted a little bit, I'm not sure why, my biggest for maybe 2025 and 2024 all combined, but Internacional to finish in the top 6 in Serie A is around 1.909. And I personally thought it was going to open up about 1.44. It's gold dust of a bet. So
wow.
If you want anything which is going to tip you over the edge in terms of your normal maximum stakes, but still being sensible, I don't understand the price of it, and I'll talk about International a little bit later on. But yeah, do check out those anti-post pieces because I go into quite some depth as to why that is a standout bet.
Okay, nice. And I'll link Nathan's anti-post pieces in the description of this show. But before we get going, I really wanted to mention BETSiE at the start of the pod. We keep getting messages about where you can find her projections and so on. And the only place to find BETSiE is on BettingExpert website. We have the projections for the Premier League, Serie A, Liga, all of the top 5 European leagues, as well as the Championship, League 1 and League 2 in England. And I'll also provide a link in the show description of wherever you listen to this podcast, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Twitter. I'll leave the links to those leagues there. She's pretty handy. Obviously, we talk about her a lot. It's basically like having your own personal betting model at your fingertips, providing projections for every single game across all of the leagues, for every single match day, every weekend. So on a Monday, you'll then see projections for the following weekend and so on. Might work a little differently if there are midweek games, but rest assured, every single projection for every single game is on site. So do go and have a look at that. I do recommend having a look. It's probably well worth your time. But yeah, enough of that. On to the bets for today's show. Scott, we're looking at Crystal Palace versus Brighton for the first bet of the pod. Palace midweek kicked off as 1.60 favourites away in Southampton, which was the shortest price they've been all season when playing away from home. They got a 92nd minute equaliser to travel home with them for a share of the spoils. And for Brighton, the Aston Villa defeat on Wednesday evening has seen them move from odds of 5.50 to 12-1 to secure a spot in the top 5. So, Scott, what is the bet for Palace versus Brighton on the weekend?
This is an interesting fixture. It always is. It means so much to both sets of supporters. It's one of the strangest rivalries in the top tier of English football, you'd say. But there's a very big strength of feeling between the supporters. They hate each other. It's a massive thing. And I just think we'll see an intense game as a result. On the back of 2 disappointing results. Palace, I didn't actually realise they'd equalised until the first thing this morning. But a very disappointing result in Southampton. Brighton as well, who've picked up the 3rd most points in the Premier League in 2025, I believe. It's certainly near the top. And anyway, just being completely overrun by Aston Villa. And it was quite a shock. But here, I expect to see Oliver Glasner's men come out firing to really make up for that disappointment. They got home advantage. They have been in very good form themselves. So we're back in both teams to score and over 9.5 shots for Crystal Palace. Both teams have scored in 8 of Palace's last 9 home matches, with those matches seeing an average of 3.22 goals per game. So very, very goal-friendly. It's the same for Brighton. Brighton away matches this season have seen 3.53 goals. So that's the average, I should say. The 3rd most in the Premier League. The fact we need a response from both teams should help to add a bit of fire to the game, but both teams have scored in 8 of the last 9 head-to-heads. Amazingly, the last 5 at Selhurst Park have ended 1-1. So, okay, they've not been the highest scoring games, but both teams have scored. There's certainly legs in that. And then we double it with over 9.5 shots for Palace. It just looks very, very doable here. Palace are averaging 16.8 shots per home game in 2025. That's their league home matches. They've hit 12 shots or more in their last 10 league home games. Brighton have conceded 30 shots in the reverse fixture. And the last time they played at Selhurst Park, they conceded 11 shots, but that was well before Glasner, December of last season. And Palace are a very, very different outfit since he's come in. So I just think it's going to be a nice attacking game with two teams that have largely been playing very well on the back of disappointing results in a match that means so, so much to the supporters. So attacking football is definitely what the doctor ordered for this one.
Big surprise, really, that Palace didn't come away with all 3 points yesterday against Southampton. Over the last 10 games, only Liverpool and Arsenal have returned more points than Palace in the whole of the Premier League. So coming up against Southampton, obviously threatening Derby's record lowest points tally, you were probably expecting something. So yeah, you're right. They'll be looking to bounce back here. And if you're one for head-to-head records, did you say the last 5 have been 1-1?
The last 5 at Selhurst Park, I believe, have been 1-1.
Another 1-1 is 7.50 on Bet365. So that's interesting. That could be a way into it. Daniele, Igor Tudor's Juventus, his reign kicked off brilliantly in terms of 3 points in his first game at the helm after the international break. You had 1.5 units on Juve or draw and under 3 goals, and that ended 1-0. So great pick from yourself. And this week again, you've gone with a pro-Juventus angle. So I'm guessing they were good value for it. And I'm guessing you see value on a Juventus side visiting Rome, where Ranieri is overseeing 7 wins on the bounce.
I do see value in Juve not losing the game. That's why I went for an Asian handicap plus 0.25 in the big match on Sunday. They play Roma, a Roma side that, by the way, since Ranieri has taken over, they gained 39 points in 18 games. Only Inter Milan have done better. And the gap has shortened between Roma and Juventus since Ranieri has normalized the Giallorossi. When he took over, they were 12 points behind Juventus. Now they're only 3 points behind the Bianconeri. So that's definitely a crucial game, almost a 6 points for Champions League qualification. What I've seen from Tudor in the first game hasn't surprised me. They got off to a winning start. He made some simple and logical changes, adjustment, putting Kenan Elditz behind the striker, Nico Gonzalez on his right, which is his preferred foot. And finally, there is a little bit more of empathy with the players, but it was only 1-0 against Genoa in the end. And, Tudor was quite mindful of having them to defend in the last 5 or 6 minutes to avoid conceding another draw. Juventus really have exhausted any bonuses with the fans and also with themselves. If they don't do extremely well in the last 8 games, they risk not to qualify for the Champions League, which is going to be catastrophic. This is going to be a tough one for Juve for sure. Roma are not scoring an awful lot recently, but they are unbeaten in the last 14 matches in Serie A. A late goal from Dob gave them the winners at Lecce. And I think with what Ranieri is doing, is amazing. 7 consecutive wins in Serie A, by the way, which is equal his best streaks in his 39 years as a manager. They only failed to score twice at home, Roma, this season. They are Serie A second best attack. But if you look at Juve, who only lost 2 away games so far this season, in the games against the top 9 in Serie A, they average more points per game than Roma, almost twice as many. Roma have only beaten Lazio of the other top 9 games. And if you look at BETSiE, our renowned tool, it gives Juve just a 0.03 goals advantage, making the draw 30% probable, and the Roma win only 34%. So with over 65% chances of Juve not to lose the game, it seems a good odd here to go for an Asian handicap plus 0.25. It opened at 183. It's gone down to 179. And I think, probably Juventus could come out with a point from the Olympic.
Yeah, BETSiE has this as projected goals-wise, Roma 1.15, Juve 1.17, so ridiculously close. Is this one of those games where if Roma was plus 0.25, then you'd be on Roma. It's just solely because of, the line in front of us.
Yes, it's mostly because of the line is in front of us, and also because Roma have been playing under the same manager for a bit longer than Juve. Juve had got few injuries as well. They are without Gatti at the back, so Tudor he's left with a bit of a dilemma, sticking with the back three, which worked well in his first game, or but obviously without Gatti, it's been more difficult, or reverse into a back four. There is still the doubt in the attack whether it's going to be Vlahovic with Colomboani or just Vlahovic and Ildiz in behind him. So I think Juventus come into this game with more doubts than certainties, and that's why I'm not fully going for a win for them. Roma, on the other hand, has to remember they are without Paulo Dybala, who's the best creative player. So again, perhaps Roma in the recent weeks have overperformed just a little bit. I mean, the runs of results and the streak is amazing. But if you look at BETSiE projects Juve to finish with 70 points in the table, therefore fourth, which that would mean Tudor would average 2 points per game from now on. He won the first. This one could be a draw. I think it all comes fall into places.
Daniele gave me a sort of a way into Juve games last week when we were chatting, and there's an
a wrong
interesting.
tip though.
Yeah, I know,
One.
but there was a lesson learned. So he got two to like in his team to press from the front, and
Yes.
Koopmeiners has actually made 3 tackles in his 66 minutes last week. You can get him a 2.5 to make 2 tackles now. I did look at the data towards Lazio the back end of last season, and that position on the field does tend to make a few tackles under Tudor, so that's one to watch.
No, totally. I mean, I tipped Vlahovic to make a tackle against Genoa. He made 2 fouls, but no tackles. So, yeah, I think you could see Juventus front line and wing backs try to suffocate the opponents. That's how Tudor likes to play, and allows very few passes per defensive action to the opponent. So it should be seen at Rome as well. Let's see how it goes.
From Rome to Sao Paulo, and I don't want to give too much away from your anti-post article, Nathan, but Corinthians do feature positively in that, considering they're able to lean on the likes of Memphis Depay, who is probably too good for the level. So your first bet of the pod comes in their matchup versus Vasco at 10:30 UK time on Saturday evening. Corinthians 1.65 home favourites with the visitors at 5.25. So the bookies like the thought of a comfortable home win, despite this fixture being wedged in between 2 Sudamericana games.
Yeah, I've been positive about Corinthians. And they had a good State Cup campaign, but the last couple of games and the midweek game in the Sudamericana is cause for concern, shall we say, mainly because the main goalkeeper, Hugo Souza, is out injured and Matheus Donelli has come in and he's awful. He's woeful. So Corinthians are very good at home. Before their midweek game, they'd won 20 out of the last 25 and were unbeaten since June 2024. And in 18 of those 25 matches, they'd scored at least 2 goals, with Yuri Alberto, Memphis Depay, Rodrigo Garro all featuring up top. They've been wonderful to watch and the most informed team probably in South America over the last 12 months. But midweek in the Sudamericana, they lost 2-1 against Huracan, and the goal they conceded against Bahia in the first opening round have all come from wide positions, testing Donelli, who's not comfortable inside the box, and Corinthians have looked really shaky at the back. So I don't think they have any problems going forward. The one question mark over Corinthians and potentially their short price this weekend is Garro, who is their sort of number 10, who links Depay and Yuri Alberto together. He's out injured, and they've switched away from the 4-4-2 formation, which has worked so well, to a 4-3-3, and Huracan completely exploited that. Now, where Vasco have probably been underrated in the market is they play with 4-3-3. Philip Coutinho has had a wonderful start to 2025, scored a screamer midweek in Peru, which was a sentence I didn't think I'd be saying 18 months ago. They've got a striker called Pablo Forgetti, who's now 35, 36, but he's already scored 9 in 12 this season, was the top goal scorer last season, and he's a monster inside the box. So if Vasco look at how Corinthians have been setting up defensively and a little bit all at sea, they can use Forgetti's strength, Coutinho out wide. They have Payet to bring on, who's excellent from set pieces still, despite losing probably his pace a little bit over the last couple of seasons. And Corinthians probably should get over the line, but a change of goalkeeper, which makes them drastically worse. Centre-backs are a little bit shaky at the moment. Don't think they have a problem scoring, but I'd be very surprised if they keep Vasco out. And this last season finished 3-1 in favour of Corinthians, while Corinthians were on the rise really, while Vasco were sort of slipping to sort of a standard sort of mid-table sort of finish really. So yeah, I think the market has sort of, lots of people will look at Corinthians' record and be like, well, look, that's 25 out of 26 unbeaten. But how many times have we seen teams around the world, once they've lost such a good record, we saw it with Colombia at international level, once they've lost that first game, they sort of fumble for a week or two. So I still think Corinthians can probably get over the line, but I don't see them keeping a clean sheet.
Yeah, looking at the scheduling, Nathan, and I imagine there'll be a fair few teams in Brazil having to deal with kind of a similar loaded schedule. Some of these teams are playing 4 games in the next, over a period of 9 or 10 days. And that comes after, obviously, a long period of not really playing that frequently at all. Is that an angle which you often look at in the early stages of the season, like maybe to get against certain teams or to take advantage, like this one today, of maybe the bigger price favorites? Because that's a lot of games to contend with, especially when you've not played in a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And this will mainly factor into my second pick, so I'll leave that. But where I think Corinthians are maybe so short is they've been able to spend the last 7 days at home playing back-to-back home games. So they haven't travelled outside of Brazil, where Vasco have had to travel to Peru and back, and maybe then from their base to Sao Paulo is another trip. So they've basically maybe had half a day of training max at this point in the season, when there is the Libertadores and the Sudamericana. Training goes out the window. So that's the preparation between January to March. And then the rest is all about, this is how we want you to set up. And then this is sometimes where we see managers sacked within the first 5-10 games, because if those tactics don't work, they don't have a chance or a choice to adapt them, because there's very little time on the training pitch. So that's where it can play. And I don't think Vasco are going to go there and necessarily win, but it's a huge price. But evens for both teams to score, which is my bet for this match. But if you want, I always think if you like both teams to score, you're going to be leaning more towards over 2.5. And that is currently just odds against at the moment. And I'd be very surprised if that stays the case closer to kickoff.
Okay, excellent. Well, from Brazil back to the Premier League, and we're going to Everton versus Arsenal with Scott's next pick. The reverse of this match saw Arsenal draw 0-0 with Everton. Everton turn up, hit 2 shots, 0.09 XG, 23% possession, defended for their lives, and left with a point. For this game, BETSiE has Everton plus 0.75 Asian handicap at 1.95 as her best bet of the week in the Premier League, which feels a little bit scary. But the 1.66 projected goal total for this game is the lowest total of all 10 matches, so that probably goes some way to explaining that best bet. Scott, what is your bet for this one?
So I'm backing under 29.5 shots in the match and over 16.5 throws for Arsenal. As you say, BETSie's predicting a very, very cagey game. I think it's probably harsh on David Moyes' Everton to say they've been scoring plenty of goals compared to the Dyche era, certainly. But what they have been good at doing is restricting the amount of opportunities that happen in the game of football. Their league matches under David Moyes have seen an average of 21.91 shots. That drops to just 20.5 if we only include the data from their league matches at Goodison. So they're very much spoilers. They upset the rhythm of the game. They know what they're good at. They've created chances in their own life. They're certainly better than they were under Dyche. But I'm so happy to back under 29.5 shots, given the fact that Arsenal as well will have one eye on that massive Champions League clash. So I don't see Arsenal racking up an obscene amount of opportunities. We already know how good defensively Arteta's team are. So that shot line is a little high if we wanted to take it as a single, but certainly in this double, it appeals even more because we've raised it. So we're getting odds at 1.8 for our double. There have been 28 shots or less in all 11 of Moyes' league games in charge of Everton. Obviously, in this stint, I haven't gone back to 2013, but that's all that matters for now. They've forced an average of 20.18 throws per game in those matches, so well above the 16.5 required for this bet to land. The opposition have had 17 plus in 10 of those 11 matches. Arsenal away matches, an average of 22.6 shots this season. The last time it exceeded the 29 shot mark was on the 10th of November when they faced Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Obviously, Arsenal have had their injury woes, particularly up front. I know Saka's back. But Saka's back for the Champions League. They may not even risk him at Goodison at the weekend. I think now he's got his name on the score sheet, could get some minutes potentially, but this isn't one for Arsenal to fire up the troops and get everyone going ready for Madrid. They want to keep everybody fit and sharp. The 23 throws happened when they faced Everton earlier in the year. There were 24 throws the last time they faced Everton at Goodison Park. Everton were able to force 22 throws out of Liverpool midweek at Anfield, and Liverpool are very controlled on the ball, particularly at home. So the fact that Everton were able to force so many, I'm very confident coming into this game at Goodison, where the home crowd will be up for it. There's a lot of positive talk around Everton at the moment, which for Evertonians, I'm sure it's a massive shock. Paddy Power did a little sketch about it this week, didn't they? Everton fans having cause for optimism. And it's an unusual time for Everton. I just think they'll perform well enough to keep this respectable. So I do like BETSie's best bet if that's what floats your boat. But under 29.5 shots and over 16.5 throws is my angle into it. And basically we're back in Everton to make a good game of it and not be overrun by Arsenal.
And they were quite good last night. They had against Liverpool. They had a goal ruled out. I saw Beto hit the post, didn't he? After Van Dijk had like that kind of air kick. I'm not sure what was going on there. So they were unlucky not to score and kept it at 1-0. So respectable. And in terms of Arsenal, obviously Saka's back, like you said. Not sure how many minutes he'll get on the weekend, but it wasn't ideal midweek against Fulham because although Saka come back, scored off the bench, they lost Gabriel to injury. Timber's injured. Calafiori's injured as well, all on the run-up to Real Madrid. So the defence for the weekend and the defence for that Real Madrid first leg tie is looking depleted. I'm not even sure who's going to be featuring back there. Jakub Kiwior, Zinchenko, Tierney, perhaps. Really not ideal, especially when you've got Real Madrid coming to town. So that will be interesting. Does that have like any bearing on your bet, Scott, or not really?
Not a massive deal. Obviously, Everton will feel more inclined to get a goal. Liverpool were solid yesterday because of their first choice defence being there, but it'll buoy Everton's chances. But basically, for this bet to land, I'm not too worried about the 29.5 shots. I don't see Arsenal hitting the 14, the 15 that'd be required for this to even have a chance. So the fact that Everton would be buoyed by it probably helps our throws. They'll get into Arsenal a little bit more. Arsenal's second string defenders are less adept at playing through the defense, the opposition press. So yeah, throw-ins, it probably helps us there. Not too concerned about the shots. I think it would take an incredible change in the way these two teams approach the game for that to go over.
Just 15 shots in the reverse, and like I said, 2 Everton shots making up that total. So that under 29.5 shots angle probably is going to squeak in. I would lean towards. Right then, we're off to Bologna next, and we are focusing on a 2.0 Asian goal line, which does look rather inviting. On their day, Bologna-Napoli, you'd have to say that either side could return stakes at least on this line. Bologna have scored 2 or more goals in a game themselves in 18 out of 30 matches this season, with Napoli scoring 2+ in 15 out of 30. So, Daniele, what's your thinking here?
There is too much at stake in this game for both of them for the game to be cagey and to be defensive. It's the last game of the match day on Monday, so they would know what they need to do, Napoli, to cut the gap with Inter, to reach them maybe, and Bologna, whether they've been leapfrogged by Juventus and how tight the Champions League race is. But I would expect these both teams that they will have to go for it, really. A draw is pretty much useless. Therefore, the line of over 2.5 goals, which, by the way, if it ends 2-0 or 1-1 or 0-2, you get your money back, seems really, really appealing. First of all, because Napoli have returned to a 4-3-3 formation with David Neres on the wing against Milan, and the effect we're seeing. They were quick off the mark, 2 goals in the first 20 minutes against the Rossoneri. Then they dropped off in the second half. I think a bit of mental energy came out. Milan had a penalty. They conceded a few chances. In the end, I think they were worthy winners. But for Napoli, this is the game. I think if they do win this game, regardless of what Inter does at the weekend, their chances to win the title are going to increase threefold, because after that, the remaining 7 games for Napoli are very, very winnable, especially the one that they were going to play at the Maradona. For Bologna, on the other hand, they have almost clinched the final, the Coppa Italia final, thanks to a 3-0 win against Empoli. But they've also been extraordinary because they won these last 6 games played at home. For Bologna, having played in the Champions League has been a great learning curve. Initially in the season, they struggled, but then they took a lot of courage and a lot of heart from good performances. Those 2 defeats in England against Aston Villa and Liverpool, well, they really held their own. Then they beat Borussia Dortmund. So they come out really stronger, but it's credit mostly to the manager, Vincenzo Italiano, who's been doing things very well in the last few seasons at Fiorentina and got them play with a little bit more courage. They are more exciting going forward than they were with Thiago Motta last season. I think if you look at the head-to-head and the stats, it can be a little bit deceiving. Napoli beat Bologna 3-0 this season, but it was match day 2. And in 2025, Bologna have averaged more points per game than Napoli. So the question is, why is this line so low? Why is he over 2 and not over 2.25? It's because Bologna and Napoli rank first and second, respectively, for fewest shots conceded, averaging less than shots conceded per games. So the defensive solidity is obviously there. However, we need to point out 2 things. First of all, Bologna at home, who is the team that concedes less shots at home, are yet to play Napoli, Juventus, Inter. So the top 3 out of 4 in the top 5. So you will argue they played the easiest ones at home, therefore have conceded few shots. Also, in only 12 out of 59 matches of these 2 teams combined, there've been fewer than 2 goals. So this bet would have won, or at least would have been a push in over 70% of the cases. Again, I think this is gonna be a game where they will have to go for it, and there could be an early goal as well. That's why I went for the over 2 goals line.
BETSiE has this projected at 1.94, so missing that 2.0 line by a really small margin. That split Bologna 0.87 and Napoli 1.06, and the bookmakers have Napoli as 2.62 favourites against Bologna at 2.80, so very close in that regard as well. Do you see it as that kind of game, Daniele? Would you not want to put your hat on either side here?
It's impossible to split them at the moment. These are very different styles of play as well, very different personnel. But I think the defensive solidity on Napoli can really be tested by Bologna's movement and directness as well. They will be without Santiago Castro, the top striker, but Tis Dallinga scored twice during the week. And then you got Orsolini, already 11 goals this season, matching his best tally, a player that struggled to fit into Spalletti's Italy, but he's been the best midfielder and scoring winger, call him winger if you like, in Italy for the past 2-3 seasons. On the other hand, you got Lukaku, back in form, scored at the weekend. As I mentioned, David Neres, Scott McTominay coming back to the fold. So, yeah, team's pretty much at full strength. I think we're going to see goals.
Lovely stuff. Nathan, your next pod selection comes again in Brazil, and again it features a team playing only 4 days after Sudamericana exploits in Peru. Atletico Mineiro versus Sao Paulo. What is your fancy here?
Yeah, I really like Mineiro around the evens mark. I think minus 0.5 on the Asian handicap just edges over evens. More to do with the naked eye and a general consensus and feel for Mineiro in this one for a few reasons. Mineiro, yes, they lost their first game to Gremio 2-1. First goal shouldn't have stood. It was a clear error from VAR because one of the Gremio players almost stumbled on someone's head, and I don't know how it went missing. Sometimes there is that home advantage in South America.
Not the best start to the season after one game from VAR.
It wasn't when I was on Mineiro either, but they were a calamity at the back within the next 5-10 minutes, and a defensive error put Gremio 2-0 up. But after that, it was all Mineiro, and I don't know how they didn't get anything out of the game. 2.28 XG, 11 corners to 1, 2.5 times as many passes. Ronnie from Palmeiras has been one of their big signings. He scored another, which was ruled out for offside just. They had so many chances. I don't know how they didn't win it. It was one of those games where if they played it another 100 times, they'd definitely get points out of it, 99. Then, yes, that difficult trip to Peru in the Sudamericana, where again, they were heavily frustrated, drew 0-0. But we've seen that time and time again. Brazilian teams in either the Libertadores or Sudamericana, because their seasons have just started, where everyone else is 5-10 games into it. This is where we sometimes see them fumble in the first couple of weeks. But Mineiro will head into this frustrated and wanting to pick up the 3 points. Redemption has to be there for them. And I'll get into Sao Paulo in a minute, but Mineiro at home should pick up the points for basically the investment they've had during the transfer window. So last season, they stayed up on the final day of the season, but got to the Libertadores final, whereas in the year before in Brazil, they'd finished third and they were challenging for the title. They've heavily invested. They've brought in Junior Santos from Botafogo, who was the Libertadores top goal scorer last season. He's playing alongside Hulk. You have Ronnie from Palmeiras, who still has a point to prove, and I think he's going to be a great shout for some top goal scorer bets in international competitions. You've got Alan Franco in the middle, who's a nice technician. Guilherme Arana, who's Brazil's current left back. So they have so much quality there. They should be pushing to finish in the top 6 this season. I'm surprised that they haven't picked up a win from the first 2 games, but I think it is right around the corner. And that can come against Sao Paulo, who, yes, they drew 0-0 in the first game of the season and then beat Talleres in the Libertadores overnight 1-0. But they head into this fixture without Lucas Moura, who was the top goal scorer last season, and Oscar, who's still injured, who is their big big off-season signing, shall I say. And Luis Abeldia, the manager, has completely changed his 4-3-3 formation and gone with a 5-3-2-1. Yeah, that's right. Without too many players there. The reason why he's done that is because he wants to give Oscar a free role in the middle of the pitch. And so he's gone with 5 at the back. But Oscar and Lucas Moura didn't feature against Sport Recife in the first game of the season and drew 0-0. And the fans were booing him, calling him donkey, wanting him to get sacked. Like, it was a really poor display. They should have won that game comfortably, and they didn't. And now they only beat Talleres, who are really struggling in Argentina. And the goal they scored last night was incredibly weak. The keeper he should have pushed it out, and he didn't. So they got incredibly lucky overnight. So yes, they've kept 2 clean sheets so far. So you could argue that Mineiro may struggle to break them down, but Mineiro have one of the best attacks going forward. Hulk alone I think he scored 10, 12 goals last season, but because of the additions of Ronnie, and they've got Junior Santos on the bench with Scarpa in behind and Alan Franco, they sort of interchange a little bit. We saw Hulk's role change a little bit against Gremio. He was coming short rather than just sort of staying in and around the box, and I think that can lure sort of Sao Paulo's age in defence, pull them about a little bit. And I think it will just take 1 goal to win this. And I know I'm tipping up Mineiro around evens, but Mineiro to win and Ronnie to score any time is around 5.50. And I think he's the one with the points proof. He looks so lively against Gremio. So just with the naked eye, I'm surprised he didn't get 2 or 3 goals in that game itself. So if they find a way in, if they pull that Sao Paulo defence about, he's a really, really good option to score. But without Lucas Moura or Oscar, this is a very average side.
Okay, nice. Yeah, just looking at Mineiro's team now, like we spoke about on this pod before, Gustavo Scarpa, I think he's brilliant. Mm-hmm. Unlucky not to maybe feature more with Forest and kick on in the Premier League. But in terms of Hulk up top, I've admittedly not seen too much of him recently. 38 years old. Has he still got the legs to dictate games in Brazil? Or
yeah, I mean, he doesn't necessarily need it. I think just his presence there puts defenders off, and like having this more free role where he's willing to drop into sort of a deeper role, use his strength to then use the width of Arana or Scarpa if they want to go onto the wings, and then look to utilize Ronnie and Junior Santos. They were doing that against Gremio, and it was working really well. And like I said, they were so unfortunate not to get any points out of that game. He's still a monster in Brazil. Like, a lot of his goals have been from free kicks, as we'll see on Twitter. They always seem to go viral every now and again, but he's consistently scored at double digits ever since coming back to Mineiro in Brazil. So it doesn't really matter too much about his legs because, yeah, you don't need me to tell you how strong he is.
Oh, that's fair enough. probably the last player I'd want to be coming up against if I was a centre back in Brazil.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. Right, that brings an end to the two bets each section of the show, and now we're going to move on to the treble. Scott, do you want to kick us off with your first treble pick?
Yep, we're staying in England for my treble pick. We're going to back both teams to score on under 31.5 shots in the Manchester derby. I know unders shots bets are not everyone's cup of tea, but I guess a nice little price here, and the numbers, as always, are very, very promising. Both teams have scored in 8 of the last 9 head-to-heads. Obviously, back in Man United, the score nowadays is a bit of a worry, especially the way they tend to perform up front. But they score well against City. So 3.89 goals per game on average over that 9-game head-to-head streak, obviously across various competitions, a couple of FA Cup meetings and the Community Shield and whatnot. But goals have been pretty consistent. City won the exception 3-0. So I'm expecting goals. I think United will get on the score sheet given the fact they're home. Both teams have scored in in 8 of Man United's last 9 home matches, which surprised me a little bit, to be honest. To my mind, I didn't realise United had scored in 8 of the last 9 home games. Just 2 clean sheets in City's last 9 away matches across all competitions, and those games have seen an average of 3.78 goals. So well above 3. We're talking we should see plenty of goals here, hoping that United can get on the score sheet. Obviously, their woes up front have been well documented under Amorim, whether it's personnel, whether it's approach. But what you can't argue with is that Amorim is certainly more patient with the ball than his predecessor. United were very gung-ho last season in particular, conceding a hell of a lot of shots, trying to just sling the ball forward quickly. Now they're more measured, and okay, this current form of United isn't the design that Amorim would have in mind, but it's certainly having an impact on the stats. Their league matches under Amorim have seen an average of 24.79 shots, so way, way, way below the 31.5 shots that we've got as part of our bet here. City away matches, 25.87 shots on average. There were 20 shots when United won at the Etihad earlier in the season. Amorim was also in charge of that game. There were just 17 shots when Ten Hag was in charge for the Community Shield. Under 31.5 shots has landed in the last 10 meetings between the teams at Old Trafford. And those games have seen an average of 20.2 shots. So those looking for singles or maybe a long shot, you could be tempted to back way below on that shot line. I think we'll see more like 22, 23 shots in this game. But both teams to score an under 31.5 shots at 1.75 is my pick for this week's treble.
Lovely. Thanks, Scott. Daniele?
Sticking to Serie A, staying with Inter, Parma-Inter on Saturday. And I'm going to go with Parma with a positive Asian handicap of plus 1.5, which pays 160 with Bet365. Inter coming on the back of another derby, another winless derby, by the way, the 4th in the season against Milan in Coppa Italia, 1-1, although probably they will be the happiest of the two sides because considering they started the game without 7 regulars of their starting 11, including Dumfries and Lautaro Martinez, they have more chances to win the game. However, the 20 points gap between Milan wasn't actually seen on the pitch as it happened in the previous 3 games this season. Milan somehow with their setup 4-2-3-1 with Leao and Pulisic and Reinders able to produce counter-attacks somehow manages to blocks Inter. But I think if you look at the way the Inter season is going, they are in for a treble still. So it's really, it can be a great season. They can win 1 title, they can win 2 titles, they can win 0 titles. Because I think Napoli, as I said, they still have chances for this Scudetto race. And I think Inter games from now until the end of the season are going to be very, very tight. They played an awful lot of games and they're going to be nip and tuck. Yes, they got the best team in Italy, but sometimes that's not enough. And I looked at what they've done post derbies. Okay, this season post derby, post playing Milan, they won 3-2 away at Udinese, 1-0 away at Venezia, and lost 3-0 against Fiorentina. In total, of the last 10 games played post derby, Inter have just won 2, both at home, by more than a 1 goal margin. Parma, on the other hand, have only lost twice by more than a goal margin at home, and actually the last defeat 3-1 against Lecce, they won the XG battle. With the new manager, Chivu, who by the way is a former Inter player, Parma have increased their points per game ratio. Based on underlying data, they will be comfortably saved. And the last time Inter won convincingly away from home in the league was at the end of January when they beat 4-0 Lecce. I think this is going to be more of a nip and tuck game. It's going to be more cagey. I don't see Inter winning by more than 2 goals margin here. So I'm going to go for Asian handicap plus 1.5.
Thank you, Daniele, backing against his boyhood club, which is always sad to see. Nathan,
Yes.
bring us home, please.
Yeah, Internacional to beat Cruzeiro. I think if you shop around, there's 1.83, but that is rapidly shortening to around about 1.75 with general bookmakers. But Internacional, obviously, I said at the start of the podcast, top 6 finish was a ridiculous price, and I fancy them to serve it up to Flamengo to actually win the league. So if I feel like they can try and win the league, they should be winning these games at home. Last season, they went on like a 16-17 game unbeaten run after dealing with all sorts of issues off the pitch when there was flooding in the south of Brazil, etc., and then almost won the title. So they went from relegation candidates to 3 or 4 points at the time away from actually winning the league before finally running out of a bit of steam. But they've been settled this season. They're a team which are very complete. They haven't sold too many players. They haven't bought too many players, which, to be fair, is always a plus in Brazil. Many teams have changed over, and one of those is Cruzeiro. They spent an awful lot of money, brought in a lot of talent, but they haven't quite gelled yet. In the State Cup, which they were expected to win before the season started, they didn't. Massively underperformed. Round 1, they played Mirassol, recently promoted, expected to finish 19th or 20th this season, raced into a 2-0 lead. Mirassol pegged them back to 2-1 on the stroke of half-time. And then Cruzeiro were lucky and fortunate to hold on. And that was really concerning. And then, as you said, Sam, with the Sudamericana games, they travelled midweek to Argentina and lost 1-0 in the last minute, but deserved to lose as well. Where Internacional, they haven't played yet at the time of recording this podcast, but they played Bahia. So they travel, but they stay in Brazil. So that actually helps them out massively. But at home, they haven't lost to Cruzeiro since 2015. They've only conceded 1 goal in the last 7, narrowly beaten 1-0 last season. And I genuinely think they're one of the best teams in South America. So add all that together, a very complete team who are settled against a new team who are in a transitional period. Their manager is under quite a bit of pressure already because of the amount of money which has been spent. Cruzeiro are expected to challenge for a top 6. They may fall short, where Internacional should be looking at a top 1st, 2nd, 3rd finish this season. So price of around 1.80 is a lot of value to be had.
Lovely recap of the pod treble. United versus City, both teams are scoring under 31.5 shots. Parma plus 1.5 Asian handicap versus Inter Milan, and Internacional to beat Cruzeiro. That comes out at 4.90, and we'll be taking that for a quarter of a unit. So let's do a quick recap of selections and your unit stakes attached to them. Please, we'll start with Scott.
First up, Crystal Palace versus Brighton. Both teams to score and over 9.5 shots for Palace at 1.83, 1 unit. Everton versus Arsenal, under 29.5 shots and over 16.5 throws for Arsenal at 1.8, also a unit.
Lovely. Daniele?
Juventus on the Asian handicap plus 0.25 against Roma 179, and Bologna Napoli over 2 goals Asian line 187, both 1 units.
Perfect. Nathan?
Corinthians, Vasco, both teams to score at evens 1.25 units, and Mineiro minus 0.5 on the Asian handicap to beat Sao Paulo at evens, also 1.25 units.
Okay, nice. Going for it. So that brings the show to a close. If you are going to be having a bet this weekend, then please do gamble responsibly, staking only what you can afford. And on behalf of myself, Daniele, Scott, and Nathan, thank you for listening, and we will be back next week. See you then.
See you later.